Okay, I think we can probably get started. Some folks might trickle in, but we'll be sure to share the recording afterward for anyone who misses the beginning. Nice to see everyone. Sophie, we've probably interacted via the Sport channel before. I'm here with Mangat and Chris, who I'll introduce more in a second, and you can't see them because we're having some technical difficulties, but three of us are here to walk you through Anvil's Q3 product update. So as I mentioned, Mangat, who I think y'all are familiar with, he's our CEO, and then Chris, who's a senior engineer who's here to demonstrate dynamic workflows, which is our enterprise feature that we're going to be taking you through today. And Chris is the mastermind behind it all, so he'll be showing it to you today. Just quick agenda. We'll be going through some of the new features and improvements that we made from the last quarter. And then, as I mentioned, I mentioned the wrong feature. We'll be going through incremental signing as our feature highlight, which is a new enterprise feature that we built in the last quarter. And then we'll also be giving a roadmap preview of what is coming up in Q3 and beyond. Cool. We'll jump into Q2 releases in a sec, but just wanted to quickly note that we will have a Q&A session at the end. So if there are any questions, please drop them into the chat, and we'll be sure to get to them at the end of the webinar. All right. So quickly running through some of the things that we built in the last quarter that you may or may not be aware of. And we'll be sure to share this link out as well, so you can peruse sort of at your own pace. Related to our workflows product, we have strict validation on phone number fields. So you have the ability to validate area codes. Then we have this incremental signing in workflows, which is the feature we'll be demonstrating today. But that essentially allows you to add data to a workflow submission between signers rather than wait to collect signatures until all web forms and data collection are completed. We also support 2 last names on our web form name fields. This is particularly helpful for customers working internationally. We know, for example, in Spain, having 2 last names is quite common. So this is a pretty powerful feature for folks who need to support web forms in other countries. And then increased editor role capability. This is not a huge one, but basically editors within your organization now have the ability to unlock submissions from within the dashboard. Dynamic workflows. This is one that I think you've probably seen a bit about from us. This is a newish feature where you are able to combine a set of existing workflows in any order into a single workflow that will result in a single review page and signature packet. Mangat, stop me at any point if I'm missing anything, by the way. And then again, another enterprise feature, duplicating and moving workflows and document templates. If you're one of our organizations that has an organization tree, so a parent organization and some child organizations, this will allow you to move workflows and document templates between and across those organizations. And then more internationalization features, phone numbers, just some improvements to phone numbers and address fields. You can set default regions for choosing between countries. And also we support full and abbreviated state names in our international address field now. Getting into both workflows and Etch eSign. As many of you know, Anvil has some pretty robust styling options with CSS injection. We now allow you to set that at the organization level rather than the individual workflow or Etch packet level. You can continue to do that, but this allows you to set a single style sheet and have it applied to everything within your organization if you don't want it set every single time. And then single-use URLs, Mangat, I may ask you to add some context on this one, but essentially this is an additional security feature for our embedded web forms and e-signature experience.
Yeah, I'm happy to add a little bit of context here. The reasoning for this is really, when you are embedding a session of the editors in your system, you don't want somebody to be able to copy that link, move it outside of your system, and then use it. whether it's at their own, at a later point in time, or kind of in their own system. So what this does is, once that link has been used and is effectively burned, you can't use it again. And you would have to request a new link for that embedded editor view to then render that embedded editor view. And you would have to request that link with your API keys.
Great, thank you. And then finally in this section, we now are sending a notification email, one of those internal notification emails, when a signer has completed their portion of an etch packet. Prior to this, we were only sending a notification when the packet was completed. Now you'll be able to get notifications when individual signers have completed their portion. And again, this can be changed within your organization settings. And then lastly, Mangat, I'm going to have you talk through set IP restrictions for API keys, please.
Sure. So effectively what this means is that you can restrict the requests that come from a specific set of IP addresses. So this is a very enterprise feature where if you have specific IP addresses where you will always be making your requests from, you can add those to a list so that we only accept the API request from that IP address and not from any other IP address.
Great, thanks. And then lastly, before we get into our new exciting feature, would be interactive fields on any filled PDFs filled with our PDF services API. So sort of a foundational layer for the feature we're about to show you, but basically allows you to optionally make an entire document or individual specific fields on a document editable in something like a preview after it's been filled with Anvil. Great. Again, any questions on those features, please do pop them in the Q&A and we'll get to them later. Great. Now this is kind of the meat of the webinar today, which is our new feature, which is incremental workflows. And I'm going to hand it over to Mangat and to Chris to walk you through this feature for us. So starting with just an overview of the feature, Mangat, would love if you could take this part.
Yeah, absolutely. So historically in Anvil, when you created a workflow, the way it would work is you would have to complete all of the data collection before Anvil generates the documents, the PDFs, and sends it through signature. So this worked pretty well for most use cases, but there are certainly use cases where you want to be able to modify the document in between signers. A common scenario for this is the I-9, where the employee fills out the top portion of the document, signs, then the employer reviews the top portion and the signature, fills out some information about the organization, and then signs. So in this case, you've effectively broken up the data collection into two parts, as well as the signing experience into two parts. So with incremental signing, we are now able to support this use case. As you can see in this diagram below, there is a web form that triggers the start of the workflow. It collects some information, the signer signs, and then there can be one or more web forms that are completed before the second signer signs. You can repeat this process in the flow for as many signers and as many web forms as you may have. And then at the very end, you have one single signed packet with an audit trail of all the signatures and the information that's added in between each signature. So with that, I will head over to Chris Newhouse to demonstrate this for everybody to see.
Hey, everybody. Let's see here. Can you all hear me okay? I hope.
We can.
Okay, great. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Okay, great. So as Mangat said, a common use case is the I-9, which is basically a flow where you have an employee that needs to fill out some data, and then an employer that needs to fill out some other data. All of that data needs to end up on this one PDF form that the government requires. But what is common about this scenario is that the employee might be ready to provide their information sometime before the employer kind of knows everything they need to know about, where they're going to place that employee. And so you don't want to have the employee sort of have to come back twice, once to fill stuff out, and then another time at a later date to sign things. And also, you can't sort of save a signature for later and then apply it later. There's got to be some solution for that. And the solution that is sort of available in the PDF specification is what we're referring to as incremental, which allows for this exact scenario where you create a form on the PDF, fill it out with whatever data you have at the time. It can then be signed. You can then subsequently update those fields with data, and the change and the things that have changed, between the initial version that was signed and that update are kept track of internally in the PDF, and that allows it to be this audit trail and diff availability allows it to then be subsequently signed again by another person without invalidating the prior signature. So a lot of the setup is exactly how you would do kind of enter. So we've got on the right-hand side here, you see the document. We've got some of the fields mapped. These top green fields here are from the employer or for the employer. There's the employer signature down here. And then here are fields that come from the employee, top with the employee. Fields down here are for the employer, hiring firm. And so we have a form here on the left for the employee, and we have a second form here for the employer that gathers information we need there. And again, this is basically exactly how you would set things up for a traditional workflow or flow within our system. But the difference is that over here in the area where you set up the signers, there's this advanced tab, and we click on this. There's this new called signature events, where we can actually change from going to a linear path of collecting all the data first and then collecting all the signatures second, to any sort of combination of collecting data and then signatures that we want. And you can see here, the forms are in this sort of lighter dot. These signatures are on these darker dots with numbers, and you can drag and drop the order of the things. So if you wanted to have the employee, employer go first, and then the signers, that's sort of a traditional flow. But what we were discussing here is that the employee fills some stuff out, then they sign, then the employer fills some stuff out, then they sign. And as Maggot also mentioned, this is a pretty simple example of the power of this and the capability of it, but this sort of sequence could go on and on. You could have one workflow or multiple workflows, then a single signature or multiple signatures, followed by one or more workflows that need to be filled out, followed by one or more signatures, and so on and so forth. This is just a simple example. So let's see it in action. So what we'll do here is kick off a new instantiation of the flow that should take us to the employee workflow. So this is Jane Johnson. It's all filled out for speed here. That gets submitted. We review this, finalize it. We'll generate the document, and then that person will be asked to sign. So this is the employer example. We pre-populate their signature, look and feel, and the initials as well, and then we go to begin signing. As you can see here, Jane's information was filled out in the employee area, and then her signature is here. We click on that, we'll fill in the signature, update the document, sign it, and she's done. At this point, this tab can be closed. If I go back here to our sort of dashboard, here we'll see the in progress packet workflow that we were just looking at here. We'll click into some details, and you can see that Jane is signed. The employee workflow has been filled out, and the next step is for the employer workflow to be filled out. So we'll copy that link. This can all be done programmatically as well. If you have webhooks set up, you'll get notifications of each of these steps being completed, and you can trigger things in your system from there. But in this case, we'll just do a manual copy of the link for the employer. It takes it to their form, which is the employer form that we looked at. And this is Sally Sanders. We got her email and her title, etc. She's going to go ahead and verify her data. We'll submit it. What's happening now is we're updating the existing documents that we saw that were already signed, and now it's her turn to sign. So we bring her here. Before we go ahead and actually sign everything, you'll notice that, again, Jane, the employee stuff is here. the employee signature is there, but down here in the employer area, we've filled in this information, Sally Sanders, her title, the company, et cetera. And then here's the spot for her signature. Now she signs it and we're going through and making a valid signature. We can then download the resulting files, open that up, unzip it. And if we take the file off screen here and drop it into Adobe Acrobat, it will go out and validate the signatures. You can see here in this bar up top that the signatures are all valid. If I click on the signature panel for more details, you can see each of the individual signatures. The first one here is the employee signing. The second one here is actually an invisible signature by us for the update that occurred before the third signature, which was the employer or the hiring manager. And you can see they're all valid and it's all supported by the PDF spec, and that is the glory of it. And that is that's the incremental signing example. Again, that's a pretty simple example, but you know, it can support very complex things as well.
I do have one question for you, Chris, and might be putting you on the spot here a little bit. Because I'll say I did not run this question ahead of time through everybody here. So here we go. So one question I had was, in looking at that incremental signing workflow, it was like signer one fills out information, signs, signer two fills out information, signs. Is there a way to then have signer one fill out more information and sign? So if you're effectively, it's like somewhat circular in that sense. Is that possible in the today's setup, or is that something that we're still working on?
Yeah, I think that's possible. You know, you would just set up a third signer that effectively is, you know, pointing to the same information as the first signer. There's no reason you can't do that, and you would just ask them, you know, you'd have to sort of trigger getting them to fill out the third web form and then subsequently sign. But there's no reason it can't be the same person and utilize information, the same information that you use to, you know, determine their name, et cetera. If it was programmatically done from, you know, for the first signer, you just make a third signer. It doesn't, you can't sort of duplicate the signer and sort of limit that, sort of have a reference to the first signer at this point in time, but you could, like I said, kind of simulate that same thing by just creating a third signer that effectively is the same as the first signer.
Got it. No, that's pretty cool. I think this question was top of mind for me because I recently came across a use case where somebody was thinking about using e-signatures for approval processes. So, you know, sometimes it's a little bit circular. Somebody triggers the approval process, needs to go up the chain, then come back down the chain. And that would be a great use case, especially if, like, you know, let's say I was creating a document, I signed off, like, this is Mangit's work, send it over to Sophie for review. She signs off, and then I sign off as acknowledgement that this is approved and final. Cool. I don't think there's any other question. Oh, there is one question.
Yeah, one question, which is, how does the multi-stage workflow work for optional signers? Example, a translator who fills or signs a form. So I guess the question would be, if one of those signers in your workflow is an optional signer and they don't exist, like what happens there?
Oh, sorry, this is for me.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm supposed to direct it to you. I think so. You'd be the best person to
if we're talking about the incremental signing stuff, yeah, so that's a great question. And that's something that we have baked in there. So let's say that you had any signers who, yeah, you know, their requirement is dependent on, you know, something in your workflow. Basically, there's a way to, if you populate their name or their email address, if either of those things are missing, the signer will be ignored at the time that it comes to be their turn to sort of be ready to sign in the round of signing. I might not be explaining this well, but basically you can conditionally sort of set the one of those values to either be, you know, blank or populated based on whatever logic you need. And if it's blank for a signer, they'll be ignored and skipped in that round of signing. So you can effectively, yeah, like have optional signers at any of the steps that signatures are going to be gathered. I hope that explanation made sense. It's absolutely something that we thought about and is supported. Yeah, where you set up a signer, but in a particular sort of round of signing, they may conditionally not be required. And in that case, you can trigger that by blanking out one of the fields, and we'll skip them. If it's like the moment we need to know whether they're in or out, we'll skip them if they're not ready.
And then I guess presumably, Chris, we just move on to the next web form.
Yeah, or the next signer.
Or the
It's
next
possible that you have a signer in between, like 3 signers in a round of signing, and just the middle one or the first one, is sort of needs to be determined at the last moment, and then we determine to skip the first one or the second one, but the third one in that round does need to be signed. They won't get skipped. So we'll go to a signature in that case. But if they were the last signer in that round, then yeah, we'd move on to the next workflow. Or if this was the last round of signers and there were no workflows after that, the whole thing would be complete.
Great. Any more questions? Otherwise, I think that's kind of it from us. I don't see any more. Just want to thank everyone for coming today. Thank you for being an Anvil customer. We're very privileged that we are able to build these awesome features for you and then see them out in the wild. And it's really exciting to get some of these questions and just think about seeing all these new features that we've built, and Chris in particular has built, get put into practice. We're excited to help you with your implementation. You can reach any of us here. I think you probably